What's going on, Soul Tribe? And welcome to Alchemist Astrology. Justin here, and are you ready to get into those lunar shenanigans? Because this is an interesting week. As they all tend to be, but this one, especially during the full moon, that's looking to be a little. Mars is involved. Mars is involved. No one, I don't know who keeps sending these invitations out to Mars, but Mars keeps wanting to crash the party. So that's one we're going to be kind of keeping eyes on there. And then because we got all these planets in Aquarius right now, there's these the moon's been just having these weird clusters of conversations where we're going to have one where there's a bunch of trines, which will be some flow there, which we like, easier aspects. And then around that time the moon gets in the Leo, then we got a little more oppositions to deal with. So that's going to be some trickiness that we're going to navigate here. But if you're new here, again, my name is Justin, and one of the things that I do on this channel is talk about the lunar shenanigans, which just goes over the astrology of the moon, what sign it's in, what phase it's in, when it happens to go void of course, and to get just a general idea of the energies that are going on, or kind of going on each week, because the moon's associated with foresight. To be forewarned is to be forearmed, so we can always count that good old moon for that. Now, before we jump into this thing, if you want to support the work that I do further, down in the description box, there is a link for my Patreon page. And I have two tiers there. One of them is for the Lucky Day podcast, and that's just a monthly show that I do that talks about the most auspicious dates for each month and for whatever endeavor that you're wanting to initiate. And then the second one will give you access to that plus a personalized monthly transit report from me. So if that's something that you're interested in, just me just kind of popping up in your mailbox, it'll be just like confetti and everything, just popping out your screen. Well, I mean, wear some glasses or something. But if that's something that you're interested in, definitely go check that out. All right, enough with that. Enough with the Justin shenanigans. Let's go ahead and get into the lunar shenanigans, because I'm going to be going over the week of January 27th to February 2nd. We're getting ready to get into February. And January was action packed. Let's go ahead and get into this thing. Because we get on the 27th of January, right before the moon enters into Gemini, the moon is going to form a sextile with Saturn. Now, when we have this, if the sextile is when, let me start off with that. That is when the celestial bodies are 60 degrees apart from one another. And so that's when they have that sort of both Cancer and Pisces, or excuse me, both Taurus and Pisces are nocturnal signs. So that's one of the things that they have in common. So there, it's a little bit weaker than the trine energy. Requires a bit more initiative, but it can create these opportunities, and it could be opportunities that are kind of Saturnian in nature. Maybe we're thinking about maybe talking to someone for a loan, possibly. Someone can kind of help you out there, or maybe you've been blocked on some kind of end, whatever this may be. And there's someone that can help you get out of this jam. That could be where taking the burdens of the things could be a bit easier there. I think with something to think about with the easier aspects with the malefics, like we have in this instant with both Saturn and Mars. There can be some really great, there can be some great that can come from them too. The malefics don't always act malefic, but I think that there is still that effort. It's not going to be like the ease that you would get with the benefic planets. But the thing with those harder and more kind of challenging planets like Saturn and Mars is that they keep things moving. They make they give us something to strive toward, I think, when we're talking about with this. So this could be just even thinking about with Saturn, any sort of like just long-term things that you're wanting to get. And then maybe you want to, plan to make a move. I'm thinking about the moon dealing with like travels and things. So maybe you want to move to a different place than where you're at. This could be, kind of working with someone like, hey, what do you think about this place? Have you ever been here? Blah, blah, just little things like that, just kind of on the smaller scale. I could see with that moon kind of sextiling Saturn there. But yeah, just something to think about with that one. And then we get into where the moon enters into Gemini, and that's going to happen at about 12:55 p.m. Pacific time. And if you're watching the video here, I have the chart up. Now, what we like to do whenever the moon's entering into a new sign. We got to get the lay of the land here. And as you can see, with all, like I said, with all these planets in here with Aquarius, there's going to be a series of trines that are going to be happening, creating some ease. But there still is in the background, there's this, the last kind of conversation that, the moon's going to have before it moves out of Gemini is that square with Saturn. So that's going to be one that we're going to we'll need to keep an eye on there now that Saturn especially is in this overcoming position to the moon. But the first thing that the moon is going to do, after it enters into Gemini, is going to form that trine with Mars. And so this could be where if you're thinking again from that moon sextile Saturn, and maybe thinking about some sort of long-term thing, maybe some sort of investment, maybe you want to get some land, and maybe you want to build a house, maybe you want to, whatever. This could be that action, that effort to make things happen. You're feeling that motivation, so it's like, let's go do this thing. So that is one kind of nice thing I think about a moon trining Mars, that could be that sort of feeling of more motivated to push. I think that can be a really kind of nice energy for the moon Mars trine. But that is one where we know it's still Mars, and so I'd say just be mindful. And now that we're kicking in, now we're talking with Saturn different. And this is the energies that are going to be kind of building up there. So there still may be those delays, those blockages that'll happen. So it'll be kind of like figuring out how to monitor that pace, when it's like, okay, I'm feeling this energy, let's get it done. Let's try to get as much as we can so that when we're not feeling that motivated, we've got that little bit of cushion to carry us through into that next sort of oomph, that next push, that we get with that Mars moon trine. So that's just something to think about with that one. Now let's go ahead and get into the 28th here, because that one, moon's still waxing here. We got a series of trines here now that are going to be happening in the next little trio here. So we got the moon starts off trining the sun, which I think a moon trining the sun is a nice one. I think that's where, just even on a personal level, that can feel just being at ease whenever the moon happens to be maybe forming a trine with your natal sun. You can think of that as just a more sort of like where the mind and the body are just feeling in alignment. There's an ease, just when you wake up and just kind of feeling good. Again, that's sort of that solar light is activated, feeling like there's less of that, maybe of like a brain fog or something along those lines. And now there's some clarity that's coming through there. And I mean, especially with this waxing energy, there's more light, that the moon is showing there. So, that could be even something really nice that's kind of happening. You're doing some nice things for the body too, I think, would be good for this kind of moon trining the sun. Do some, doing maybe like a hobby that you like, or even thinking about your kind of like your ambitions and things, where you wanted to strive through with that. And then the moon trining Mercury, that gives me more of more kind of like this mental ease that's happening there. Maybe a lot of communications could potentially be happening, especially we got between air signs here, Aquarius and Gemini just gabbing. But that could be something where you notice a lot more communication there, especially throw Venus in the mix there with this trine. This is a nice little pocket, again, minus that Saturn square that's going on there. There's still some sort of goodness that is still trying to come through, I think, with that Venus trine there, and just all this sort of like trine energy. This could be a great sort of collaborative thing, whether it be, and it doesn't have to be necessarily on like a job or anything like that. This could be just even just like catching up with like relatives or maybe siblings or friends, whatever that happens to look like. A moon trine sun, that could be a good time for just kind of hanging out with a buddy, talking about talk about what's new, just what's been kind of going on there, and kind of I think addressing just kind of every aspect of life. And I think how one's dealing with that, I think, can be a good way to know that you're not feeling by yourself in this. I think that's what this ease that's trying to show up in, I think, this little pocket too. I think that can be a really nice kind of socializing sort of day there. Maybe going out amongst the crowds, maybe going to, if there's any sort of like, maybe there's like little festivals are going on or something, along little events and things maybe happening in your town or whatever that might look like. So that might even be something to the moon, kind of representing the city. Maybe there's just something getting out and about as one can, maybe just being a tourist in your city, maybe just going around and just see the sights, explore somewhere maybe you haven't been before, or whatever that might look like. Take a different route to, the moon likes to wander. The moon never's going on a straight path there. It's just always, just kind of ambling back and forth. So that could be maybe something really nice there, because we're gonna need that because then we get to the 29th there, because before we amble back home into Cancer, the moon's first got to finish up this square with Saturn. Now, squares with Saturn can be frustrating. This would be one where I would even just kind of with the moon representing the body, just checking in to see how one is feeling. How's time been, kind of affecting the body? What are new ways that you have to tend to it? It's been fascinating. Even just thinking about how my needs for my body have changed over the years. I remember I would just like push and I'd just be running, 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 like doing all this crazy workouts. But now I still move like that, but it's very different. It's not like I can't quite do it like that. I mean, could I? Sure, but there's just going to be more chance for injury. That Mars in the first house might be shining through there more, and I don't want that. So, it's just I think that can be something too to think about just with the just kind of moon squaring Saturn. The malefics can represent those kind of like the illnesses, diseases, and things. So we want to just kind of make sure that the body's doing well. Just thinking about how we hydrating the body, how are you feeding the body, nourishing it, and even just kind of just looking at it. Just not in a critical way. Just every now and again, there have been times where I look, it's like, oh, yeah, you haven't been getting a lot of sleep lately. What's been, you got anything that you need to deal with? What's kind of going on in your environment? How are things at home? What's going on that, moon representing that home space. So how can one kind of nourish oneself, take some time? But the moon squaring in Saturn too could be one where, notice delays as far as like travel goes. That could be potentially something that's going on there. So, and something to keep in mind too, as this moon is moving through, before we get into where it moves into Cancer, just thinking about how, the moon traveling through that Gemini portion of your section and what that portion of that chart is. This is actually where, when the moon's in Gemini, I have a lunar return, like we do every month. And usually there's a bit of a more chatty time for me. I have the moon in the 11th house. So it's always a good time where I'm just like kind of like I make it a point to try to like talk with some friends during that period of time. Get some good, get some good communication going. So that's just something to pay attention to. Maybe it's going through your fourth house, so maybe it's doing some things at home, or maybe it's going through your fifth house, maybe something with your kids, or something with creative, or sixth house, something with work. So just apply that to your chart there. I think that's all I got to say about that. The moon square Saturn, I think too I think Saturn dealing with like, can be the heavier things. We're talking like it can deal with like depression. It can be self-deprecating. Can create this sluggishness, this laziness, and there's a very secretive quality with Saturn. I think that Neptune and it can get a lot of that, but Saturn's like the OG for that. Like really being secretive with its trickery. And I think Saturn's just always seen as something so maybe can hold a good poker face. And I think that it's what I'm trying to get with that. It's like paying attention, I think, with how everyone may be feeling, the moon being so closely related to the people, how the people can affect us, and I think that it's good to be, I think, a part, have that good sense of community, but also to remember how one contributes to that, how one is kind of showing up, to and how that is bettering the community. Something very interesting, just a little sidebar there that I've just thought that it's kind of, still maybe kind of working through there. But then after all that, after all that thinking, let's get out of that. Let's get home, because then the moon enters this home sign of Cancer, and that's going to happen at about 2:31 p.m. Pacific time. And I got the chart up here for when the moon's being at home, and that's nice. We love that, because when the moon in Cancer, this is where the moon's just allowed to do. It has all the resources that it's needed. So it's like when you're at home, and you got everything. You know where everything is. You know how everything works. The moon can just do moon stuff, and I think that This is where too, just getting a lay of the land. The moon is now getting out of that sort of active pocket with those Aquarius planets, and now it's kind of got a little more quiet. The only aspects that the moon is going to form is that conjunction with Jupiter, and then that trine with Saturn. So that's even just a more kind of a lighter load for the moon even entering home. I think that's kind of nice. Gives the moon a bit of a break, and I think that's something where we can maybe just all just take a break. Just take a minute and just kind of be in the body, see how it's feeling. I think the moon and water signs, especially its home sign, is a good time to see just how the body's flowing, how are things moving in the body, the physical things, the emotional things, all of those things, and then again nourishing those aspects of yourself as you can find that time, because we all got to take care of this body. So something to think about there. And then look, speaking of that conjunction, on the 30th of January, we have the moon's going to form that conjunction with Big Papa, and I got that chart up there, and that's happening at 17 degrees and 27 minutes. And now the moon's moving to the Cancer portion of your chart now. So these are normally this is where my 12th house is in my natal sun. So it's like these are normally kind of quieter times, and I at least try to make them quieter times as I can. But the moon, Jupiter, we get this once a month, and have been maybe not as abundant right now, just because Jupiter's been retrograde. But still, I think a moon conjunct Jupiter is a great time to invite remember that sense of life. I think that's something that, the first thing we could think about with Jupiter, of course, is abundance, but it's Jupiter's life giving. There's something, there's a reason we love Big Papa. It's that trust in the relief from bad things, the good aspects, when a child's born, or when you have that celebration, those friends, that sense of camaraderie, when there is that justice, when there is that sort of contentment, in one's self and in one's experience. It's Jupiter, I think, is a really, really wonderful feeling, and I think that get out and see Big Papa. Jupiter's like still real bright in the sky right now. Not quite as when it was, when the sun was in Aquarius and was like directly up, opposed the sun, but it still has a lot of light here. You still see Jupiter just it's like resplendent. It's just this brilliance. When you see Jupiter in the sky, can be this kind of this sense of awe and reverence. I think in a way that Jupiter can bring. And there's this, it's knowledge in a I think in a different way than Mercury, of course, is this sort of like deeper kind of spiritual knowing, this understanding of kind of the broader things of life, seeing kind of the bigger picture things. Jupiter, I think, doesn't just have to be just like the giving of a gift, although that can be something. This could be like, getting a gift or receiving a gift for someone. But I think it can also be that perspective change, where and it's not, I think, just looking on the bright side just for the bright side's sake, but that actual appreciation for the gifts that this life can give. I think about just the sunrise. That's something that's depending on the weather, but it's given to us all. That sunlight. That's everyone's. It's just a spectacular thing. I've been able to see the sunrise the last few days, and it's always interesting when it first rises, and you can actually just kind of look at the sun a little bit. It's like it is so crazy. Like after like 5 minutes, and it's just like, all right, that's enough of that. But it is really neat. You just see this ball of light just fill up the sky. And even prior to that, it was I'm thinking of this other person. I know they have their sun in Leo, and we had both taken pictures of the sky that on the same day we did. Just so happened. I remember looking out, just like, my gosh, this is beautiful, and they did the same thing. And so I thought that was really neat. But it's just like, appreciating those little things, even if it's just like that, when you get a chance just to even look up at the sky, if it's a clear night and just all the stars that can be out, it can be really lovely. So I think sometimes it's nice and I think it's nice to just kind of sit in that sometimes, to sit in those, find those pockets, and make those kind of miracles more frequent in one's life. To see, I was watching birds just kind of fly around in this kind of pattern here. There's a lot to appreciate, just even just out and about. So yeah, just something to think about with the moon conjunct Jupiter. I like that. I could stay in that all day. But we gotta move on. We gotta go to the 31st. Tomorrow comes, and then the sun will rise again, and then we'll have a moon trine Saturn, which is it's again an easier aspect with Saturn. I think it's taking that goodness that we were feeling with that Jupiter conjunction, and then letting that be the remembering those pockets when we got get back to the just back to maybe just everyday obligations in Saturn and things like that. Or I still have maybe you got a paper that you got to get done, or maybe you got whatever this is, the thing goes on. The list can go on depending on what we're talking about. But it can be those times where those little pockets can just help get you through, to just like, okay, I remember why I'm doing this thing in the first place, why I'm trying to get this area to wherever I'm trying to get this thing to, where I'm, whatever the trajectory of my life is trying to get to. So I think this is one, and I do think that if we can find some time in this little pocket of the moon being at home, yeah, I think savor it, savor it, because they can be, or at least it can feel fleeting. I think sometimes with thinking about Saturn just as the kind of that representation of time. Then it's we get so much time here, and it's just like, and sometimes it's again it's just taking in every moment that you can, being as finding that balance between, I think, the times, that reflecting on the past, applying that to the present to move forward into the future. I think it's that it's an intricate, it's a delicate dance, and it's easy to fall in any one thing and stay maybe too long in one thing. So I think it's about finding both the moon and Saturn have this very interesting, I think, dynamic about time. That I think that I find really fascinating. But and it can be more time for, even just a dime, I think, too, to kind of just like kind of crack down there, apply that discipline, for whatever that means. I've been thinking about, just for just like as a body example with the moon. I've been working more just kind of on just like balance and thing in the body, just like doing more kind of just more different sort of exercises and things, and it's just like that has been paying off. Putting in those reps and things, it does have these really kind of long term benefits, creating a different sort of strength in the body for me. So that's something that with that Saturn there too. And then we move, we enjoyed that until about 4:08 p.m. Pacific time. Then the moon moves into Leo, and I have the chart up here for that one. And this is where the lay of the land is looking a little bit more rocky now, because it's, as you can see now, we went from having, at first we had that trine conversation with Gemini, and then it got quiet, and then now we're having a lot of oppositions that are happening. But Saturn's at least out of the mix for this one there. But it's going to be, when we're looking at what the moon's applying to here, first one's going to be Mars, right before it gets to that full moon, and then going to oppose Venus and Mercury. So let's go ahead and get into that, talk about that full moon, because that's going to happen on the 1st of February at about 2:09 p.m. That's when it'll be exactly opposed, and I have the full moon up here. So when we're just kind of just looking at that chart, first the moon's going to be opposing Mars, and that's one where it can be this sense of civil unrest. Mars causes disturbances. Mars is there to rile things up into, sometimes, that it's not always that, that motivation, I think that we can think about with Mars, but Mars can be agitating, it can be infuriating, it can be it's inflammatory, so Mars is harsh, it's cutting. So this would be one, just like, especially as the moon's waxing. I remember reading somewhere in Balance, and I've mentioned this before, where, these hard the hard aspects with Mars are particularly hard, I think, if the moon is, increasing in light. It's almost like the moon is magnifying that martial quality and doing it so close to what's normally just an active time anyway, the full moon when the moon's up, opposite the sun. And that's happening at 13 degrees and 3 minutes of Aquarius and Leo. Something that I was thinking about, oh, do I have it pulled up here? Yeah, I wanted to look at if you're looking at the chart here, they have the chart split up by the Egyptian bounds, and the moon's going to be falling into degrees of Saturn for that full moon there. So I just wanted to read that how Vedius Valens put the delineations for those degrees ruled by Saturn. So the ones ruled by Saturn is 11 to 17 degrees, having much experience, fearful, scientific, naturally clever, narrow, religious with many children, searching out secret lore, barren, without offspring. Which is I think a very interesting contrast. I actually have my ascendant in this degree here, and I am surrounded by many children. They're the children of my friends, but I don't have my own personal offspring. So that's an interesting kind of thing to when you're thinking about these degrees. That's a little something extra for you to look into. It's in the anthology if you're ever curious about that. But there is. I think that this is a very kind of obviously hard full moon. I think again with the moon providing that foresight, I think that it could be. We'll just we'll see how these next couple of days will be there, but that would be one where I'd be mindful of just like agitation, just like rash, acting before doing, getting swept up in just like the emotions and things, and being kind of just like overcome with that. So yeah, that would be something to just kind of pay attention to there. This could be a very kind of active time. I'd be mindful if you're just kind of traveling, just be mindful of just like whether it be by car, whether whether just speeding and things like that. I'd be mindful of that. That's an easy way moon opposing the sun, get in trouble with the authorities, but that's yeah, this is a very tricky, kind of full moon here, and I think anyone would, looking at this chart would say the same, So that's going to be one to kind of keep an eye out on there for this period of time. You just kind of just be mindful, just kind of going out there. I'd say during that full moon period. And then we get to Monday, the last day here, and the second of February. And look at that, it's like we just got into February. That was like, and that's February, starting off with that full moon there. So that's interesting. And then we get to where the moon is forming an opposition with Venus, and this could be where there's this dissonance that is happening there. With whatever it could be between friends, it could be something that's a bit broader than that. Again, the moon is like the gathering of the masses and things. So we'll see. You know what I mean? There's some very obvious things that this could potentially show up there. This the moon, I would think, opposing Venus, opposing Mercury. This is there's tensions in relationships, and we're talking about it. We're talking about it, and I don't know if you've ever been around. If you've ever been around, I know this. I used to know this Aquarius sun and this Leo sun that, man, when they would go at it, they would go at it, and it was like vicious. So that would be something. Again, I laugh, but I would just be mindful of that. I think it's easy to, yeah, I think it could be easy to get kind of caught up, with this energy here. And I think something I've been sort of thinking about as of late. I've been kind of just listening to just this podcast, but kind of voraciously as of late, and just that idea of that we're all going through whatever experience we're going through, but it's all a human experience. And I think it's remembering, with especially with like the benefics, we're in this, I think we're meant to be in this together. There are other things to combat, as opposed to each other. And I think that sometimes with the stresses of just everything that's kind of going around that can bleed into relationships, it can bleed into conversations and things like that. So just I think just being kind of just aware of that, knowing whether it be with people or with just like strangers. It's not necessarily just letting people just do whatever the hell, but people are together, they got stuff they're dealing with too, and it's like, what, you deal with that. Like, oh, you must be having a tough moon transit. Moon must be going through a tough part for you in this a crappy part in this your Leo sector. So, and then I know that's not always the easy. That's the most ideal way of dealing with things, but I think even too, this could be, even troubles with Venus, Mercury, and the Moon. I think all three of these planets they all have these signifiers for as far as like commerce and, Mercury dealing with banking, Venus dealing with like markets and factory, the Moon can deal with like how we receive and like, our gains and our expenditures. And, this gives me even some maybe a little bit of turmoil there, maybe something with like finances or with some like possessions, maybe there are changes that are going on in the city there because of certain marketing things. We just had a store that just closed here not too long ago, and it'd been there for like 30 years. And so it's kind of, it's interesting to see those kind of changes there as time kind of moves on. But then, after all that, let's move out of let's get the hell out of Leo. Let's go ahead, and Moon's gonna move into Virgo at about 7:21 p.m. Pacific time. And when we look at now the Moon's in the Virgo section of our chart, and when we get a lay of the land there, it's got it's an opportunity there for a little bit of goodness with Jupiter, with that sextile that the Moon will be forming. But it's like it'll end with that opposition with Saturn. So that'll be we've got to feel for what these oppositions will feel like. So then I think when we get to that period, we'll see, maybe have a bit more of how things are going to work over time, see what the maybe long term, if there's any sort of like whatever stirs up in this little pocket here around that full moon time. And know that this is going to be different for everyone. Like, it's just, I'm speaking very very kind of generally here, and that's why we look at the different sectors of our charts and things. But even just looking at Mercury's kind of moving along here, just looking at the ruler of the Moon, but even just thinking about the moon and Virgo in general, that can be a time where just kind of getting things in order, good problem solving Moon. I always think it's a good Moon to just kind of check in with the body, see what things are working with, what if you're noticing any kind of like problems. Oh, maybe there's some that's been feeling stiff. Like, all right, let me figure out some stretches that I can do, or oh, I'm noticing my finances are doing this, or oh, I see whatever this happens to apply to. I think Virgo can get the answers for that and get things moving in the direction that you want. I'm gonna switch over now. But yeah, I think a very, very interesting way to start off February with this full moon here, and I think that it is going to be one to watch. Just making sure to. I think as well, when I even just thinking about that, when I was talking about travel, because I was just talking with my folks are in Indiana. It's cold over there. it's cold over there, and actually some friends were texting me too that they're good, but they had lost some power. So it's just like, making sure that, I'm talking like in America, but yeah, that's something to make sure that you're just taking care of your things. Make sure you're staying up, staying safe, and I think Moon and Virgo could be like for that too. Even not just when we're in the middle of something. After kind of reflecting, like, okay, if I ever have to lose power, like, how do I feel like my food reserves are? Do I need to have a little more water just kind of stored around? Have like a first aid kit, just little random things like that. To just like give practical things. That'll be used, but that would maybe keeping a stock up on things. So. But yeah, that's the week. That's the week that's going on there. So, and comment, how the week's been going for you. It's been, since, and I'd seen this coming for a minute. February's here. February's here, and it's all these. I have my ascendant and 4 planets in Leo, And so whenever there's just planets in Aquarius, but especially when we have this little stellium that's going on here, it's an active time in the chart. So there's that. Mars has, it was nice at first, with Venus. It was nice. And then Mars came through and it's just like, all right. And I have a day chart, so that's why I'm more so kind of lamenting about Mars a bit more than Saturn. I'm looking forward to Saturn moving in Aries. That'll be that'll be all right. I think that'll be all right. My son has different thoughts about that, but overall it'll be all right. But yeah, it was an interesting week for sure for me. I would say it's not too active. Just looking at the signs that kind of the moon moved through, and usually like Aries is an active, kind of a more active time for me. Pisces can be, in my case, Pisces can be a bit quieter, but and then Taurus can be, I'm getting work done. Finally, I saw the moon into Taurus, my 10th house. So I'm like, all right, let me get moving. let me get my stuff recorded, get these notes typed up, get my things going. So, and that can be, that's how I usually work with the moon. If I've been I like following the moon, and seeing how it's always talking to something, and it can be useful to and helpful to think about like when the moon's going through your 10th house, like, yeah, maybe I could do some things for like think about my career or whatever that happens to look like. I could be just doing some tasks, doing some, maybe learning some things to help sharpen one skill, how, and wherever this happens to fall in your chart. But that's just how one way that I, am incorporating this on a regular basis. But yeah, I think that's all I got for you there. So if you want to book a consultation with me down and to see to understand how the moon and these other planets and the sun are moving through your chart, there is a link to book a consultation with me. So check that out. And if you have any questions, my email's also down there. So yeah, definitely feel free to reach out. And there are a couple links for some playlists, whether it be for the Lunar Shenanigans or for Celestial News Monthly. So and that's the one that's more of a monthly one. I'm actually going to be scheduling those ones here soon. That'll come out at about the end of the month. So I think I'm gonna do it on the 30th. That's when I'm gonna have that one come out there. So, but I do monthly videos talking about what the sun and the other planets are doing. So definitely check that out if you want kind of a broader scope of what's going on. And then what else? Then there's also these other playlists for different planets in different zodiac signs in different houses, and it's just how to, ways to approach them as you're kind of navigating your natal chart. And I work with whole sign, just by the way, something to think about. But you can, and it's a little trickier with Placidus, but yeah, this one works more better with the whole sign system, but. Yeah, it's just to get just an idea of like how to read your chart, how to approach your chart, see how the different topics relate to one another, who rules those topics, and why these themes may be coming up when this is happening here. So, yeah, if that's something you're interested in, I have that all laid out for you there. But yeah, that's all I got for you this week. So until next time, stay mindful out there. You keep eyes on that moon. Catch Big Papa too. I mean, it's really cool. It's really cool, and eventually here soon in a few more months, once the Mars gets a little more, or Sun gets a little more distance from Mars, we'll soon be able to start to see Mars rising here soon. So that's gonna be interesting. That's gonna be interesting for sure. It's been a minute since I seen Mars in the sky. Yeah, and I will catch you. But it's not a show about Mars. On the next one. Later.